It is customary to chant a Santi mantra. Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Santi Santi Santi. Discrimination of truth from untruth, that is, discriminating Atman from other entities like Panchakoshas, which we mistake them to be Atman, leads us towards Mukti. In this regard, Jagadguru Sri Adi Shankaracharya teaches the way to discriminate in the form of a dialogue between an aspiring spiritual seeker and a qualified guru in the Vivekachudamani. The book Vivekachudamani is recommended by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, who said that this text explains in detail the points that have to be grasped and those who seek liberation, and thereby directing them to the true and direct path. In the previous video, we presented what constitutes bondage and how one can overcome it. We also mentioned that mistaking non-self as the self constitutes bondage. In this video, we discuss panchakoshas, which are often mistaken for the self, and show that they are not the self, that is Atman. We also show that the Atman is not a void or nothingness, since one may come to that conclusion after eliminating panchakoshas in the body. We now consider the seventh question posed by the Sisya, that is, how one can discriminate between the self and the non-self. In order to distinguish s- self from non-self, we look at the panchakoshas, which are part of our body. We often mistake them to be the self. We will now analyze each one of the panchakoshas and see if they could be the self. Let us reiterate that Brahman, that is the self, is Satyam, Gnanam, Anantam, which implies it always exists, self-existent, blissful, it is the consciousness, and it is infinite. In the Panchakoshas, there are five sheets that are that is five koshas. The first one is the physical sheet or Annamaya kosha. The second one is bioenergy sheet or the Pranamaya kosha. The third one is mental sheet or Manomaya kosha. The fourth one is the knowledge sheet or the Vijnanamaya kosha. And finally, the blissful sheet, that is Ananda kosha. We now show that self is distinct from all the five sheets, also known as the science of five sheets. From birth, we are accustomed to think that our body is the self. So, we are mired in misinformation. What we are accustomed to think from childhood is difficult to get rid of. It needs a science, sincere effort, knowledge, and discrimination capability. In this great venture, Sri Adi Shankaracharya helps us in dispelling the myth that the Panchakoshas are the self. With the superb reasoning, we come to the conclusion that none of the Panchakoshas would be the self. When all the five sheets have been eliminated, the self appears, pure essence of everlasting and unalloyed bliss, supreme, indwelling, and self effulgent. We start with the Annamaya Kosha, that is our physical body, which is most visible, and often we mistake it to be the self. Now let us see if it could be the self, that is, it could be our Atman. The body comes from food, and it remains due to food and dies when the food supply is withdrawn. It was not there prior to its birth, and it will not be there after death. Whereas Atman, that is the self, is ever existent. The perceiver is distinct from the perceived. The body is perceived as an object, hence the body cannot be the perceiver, whereas the Atman is Sarvagnani, that means it knows everything, it perceives everything. So the body cannot be the perceiver. One can survive with missing body parts, hence it depends on something else. That something else is the Atman to exist. So it cannot be the self-existent Atman. That is, body cannot be the self-existent Atman. We need body for investigating the truth about Atman. That body must be a human body with a mind capable of discrimination. Now we will look at the pranamaya kosa. Could it be the self, that is Atman, we are looking for? The pranamaya kosa consists of five sub-pranas depending on the parts of the body they serve, as shown in the figure. These five pranas are prana, apana, udana, samana, and vyana. Collectively, they are called panchapranas. Prana is the forward moving air. It moves in the body between heart and the throat. It governs the respiration, digestion, etc. Apana, air that moves away. It moves in the body between navel and feet. It governs the excretory functions. Udana, upward moving air between throat and head. It governs the growth of the body. Samana, balancing air. It moves between the navel and heart. It governs the digestion. Vyana, outward moving air. Circulates all parts of the body. Actually, there is only one energy or prana functioning in the universe. The above five pranas are the manifestation of it in the organic world. Bioenergy is the modification of Vayu. Self, that is Atman, is not a modification of anything. So, bioenergy is not the self. That is, pranamaya kosha is not the self or the Atman. Moreover, pranamaya kosha neither knows itself nor others. It is inert and devoid of consciousness. It does not know what is happiness and suffering, good or bad. Such an understanding comes from a deeper source. Self, that is Atman, is independent, whereas Pranamaya Kosa depends on the self. Hence, Pranamaya Kosa cannot be the self. Manomaya Kosha is the most important as it is the reason that gives us the sense of I and mind, which in turn leads us to think that the self is the body that has the thinking capability. In order to debunk this myth, we had to dwell deep into Manomaya Kosa's functioning. It is a source of bonding and it is also the source of liberation. Without mind, we will never be able to liberate it. This Manomaya Kosa expresses itself as the vital sheath. It possesses the ability to distinguish names and shapes and ability to reason. Comprehending the universe relies on this mental sheath. Our universe cannot be separated from the names and forms. Names and forms are intertwined within the Manomaya Kosha. The universe cannot exist independently of our Manomaya Kosha. The nervous system is energized by bioenergy. If a nerve is severed, the muscle will cease to function. If Manomaya Kosha's energy is disrupted, even those with physical strength can feel powerless, indicating that it is the essence of the underlying layers. Knowledge begins at this level. Prior to this layer, there is no understanding. We utilize language for communication, which is inherently linked to the mind. Communication occurs within a vast version of universal consciousness. I represent one point, while you represent another within this expanse. Transitioning from the physical and biosphere, we arrive at the mental sphere, also referred to as the noosphere. No society can thrive without this sphere. The mental layer acts as a sacrificial fire, fueled by numerous desires, where the Gnanendriyas serve as the priests and sense objects are the offerings that keep the fire burning. Without desires, the Gnanendriyas lack power. The universe will persist as long as the mental layer continues to ignite due to cravings for sensory pleasures. When the flames of mental layer are put out, the universe ceases to exist. Desire arises from ignorance, which leads to bondage. Ignorance exists solely within the mind. Once the mind is eliminated, we transcend the universe. The mind is filled with impressions, which will vanish with its destruction, allowing us to recognize the self. While the mind is active, we associate ourselves with the non self. Let's explore this concept further. In dreams, the mind generates its own universe, where the universe is a reflection of the mind's projections. Even in our waking state, the universe can be seen as a projection of the mind because we link a name to an object and recognize that object through that word. Thus, the mind serves as the creator of both the waking reality and the dream experience. Now, let's examine the deep sleep state. In this state, the mind is absent and we do not perceive the universe. When the mind re-emerges, so does the universe. See, if A exists when B is present and A does not exist when B is absent, then we can conclude that A is equivalent to B. This suggests that the universe is simply a manifestation of the mind. Changes in the mind lead to alterations in the perception of the universe. This mind is both the source of entrapment and the key to liberation. So one might wonder, how does the mind cause the bondage? Mind first creates an attachment in man for the body and the sensory objects and binds him through that attachment. When the mind is pure, it becomes the cause of liberation. One would purify the mind by discrimination and renunciation. A strong yearning for liberation would root out the attachment to the sense objects. Now the question is mental sheet, that is Manomaya Kosha, is the self? Ma- Manomaya Kosha has a beginning and end. Example, in deep sleep, it is not there, whereas self is always there. So, mental sheet cannot be the self. Mind is subject to modifications, unlike the self, which is unchanging. Mind experiences pain and pleasure, which are absent in the self. Mind is an object, whereas the self is a subject. Hence, mind, mental sheet, cannot be the self. Now let us consider the knowledge sheet, that is Vijnanamaya Kosha. Can it be the self? Okay, let's examine. The mind frequently struggles with clarity in reasoning and judgment, while buddhi or vijnana has the ability to reason and make decisions. When the often doubtful mind acquires clear knowledge, it evolves into buddhi. Buddhi, in conjunction with sensory organs, constitute what is referred to as the knowledge sheath or Vijnanamaya Kosha. The sensory organs function as subtle perception centers within our brains, and the Gnanendriyas extend from these centers. Buddhi reflects the light of the Atman, resulting in the development of the sense of I, and thus transforms Atma into Jiva, a dwelling person. When Buddhi is swayed by the mind's influences connected to the senses, it directs our life towards bondage, rebirth, and suffering. Traits of our Buddhi influence the direction of our life's journey. Buddhi is a unique gift bestowed upon humanity. In Vedanta, Buddhi is termed Nidhistham Brahma, denoting that which is nearest to Brahman, with the Atman residing just beyond Buddhi. The Buddhi, through its sense of I, fully identifies with the body and its organs, leading to thoughts like, I am the doer, I am the enjoyer. The light of the Atman reflected in Buddhi, along with sense of I, creates what is known as the Jiva. The knowledge sheath is without origin. All five sheaths are overlays on the self. However, when this overlay began remains unknown. A person resembles an ocean filled with desires. Each fulfilled desire leaves an impression on the vast sea of thoughts, transforming our mind into an ocean of impressions that compel the ego to seek continuous sensory experiences. In these pursuits, we engage in both virtuous and detrimental actions, facing the consequences of each. Consequently, Jiva is reborn in various bodies, ceaselessly cycling through existence. All these experiences are anchored in knowledge sheath. We experience states such as waking and dreaming within this knowledge sheath. Buddhi is the closest aspect to the self, making it the most luminous. The light of the self radiates through Buddhi, enlightening the mind, senses, and body. Buddhi directly encounters the light of the self, while the mind, organs, and body receive this light indirectly through the Buddhi. The self's light acts as a unifying force among the body, organs, mind, and Buddhi. However, the self often confuses the functions and characteristics associated with various aspects of life linked to the body as its own. The self perceives itself as either young or old, male or female, and so on. This leads to its transmigration as jiva, driven by illusion. The self continues its journey of samsara, death and rebirth, as long as the buddhi remains focused on the needs of the senses and the body. This cycle only ceases when buddhi attains enlightenment. An enlightened buddhi results in self-realization, revealing that the buddhi is merely an overlay on the self. It is crucial to recognize that our organs, body, mind, and buddhi seem to possess their own intelligence and awareness. This sense of sentience and intellect arises from the light of the self illuminating them. Their display of intelligence often leads us to confuse them with the self. For example, fire does not have a fixed form. It adapts to the shape of whatever it consumes. Similarly, the self identifies with the body and other organs. When the body suffers illness, the self perceives itself as unwell. If the mind is consumed by sorrow, the self believes it is grieving, and so on. At this juncture, the student has a doubt. It is regarding the origin of the superimposition has no beginning. Students doubt. For various reasons, the Supreme Self identifies itself as the Jiva. This identification does not have an origin, and anything without a beginning cannot be said to have an end. Therefore, the Jiva's existence must be eternal, resulting in the ongoing cycle of transmigration. Given this, how can the soul achieve liberation? For this wonderful question, the teacher responds as follows. Anything arising from the illusion cannot be deemed to be true. We have many experiences while dreaming that we do not consider part of reality. These experiences are simply manifestations of illusion. While the dream is ongoing, they appear genuine, but they disappear upon waking. Such experiences cannot hold up under examination. That is, during the investigation, the truth is revealed. The dream lacks a specific beginning, and although it has no initial point, it is not permanent. Dreams are transient experiences and do not represent reality. Misunderstandings can only be clarified through accurate comprehension. As stated in the Srutis, true knowledge involves recognizing the unity of the individual soul with Brahman. This realization comes from clearly distinguishing between the self and the non-self. And to conclude, the knowledge sheath cannot be equated with the self for several reasons. It is changeable, insentient, finite, an object of perception, and not always present. An unreal entity cannot be considered the true Atman. Now let us consider Anandamaya Kosha and check whether it is the self. So the Anandamaya Kosa represents a transformation of ignorance that reveals the reflection of the Atman, which is bliss absolute. This sheet possesses qualities of pleasure and tranquility and becomes apparent when one encounters something pleasing. It is naturally experienced by the fortunate individuals during the success of their virtuous actions, providing immense joy to all living beings with minimal effort. The self's blissful light reflecting in the inner organs, which is fully covered by tamas guna, is what makes the blissful sheet. The intense bliss experienced in the deep sleep state is a reflection of the bliss of the self. During waking, dreaming states, it is experienced to a lesser degree. The blissful seat cannot be equated with the Supreme Self, as it represents a superimposition. This sheath is essentially the light of the self that reflects upon the inner organ obscured by tamas guna. Furthermore, it is a transformation of nature, while the self transcends nature. It results from previous virtuous actions. Our true self exists independently of the consequences of our actions. Lastly, the blissful sheath is contained within the other sheaths, as the subtle sheaths permeate the gross sheath. The self is distinct from all panchakoshas. Once the panchakoshas have been systematically eliminated through the analysis of Shruti texts, what ultimately remains is the witness, the knowledge, the absolute, the Atman. Through a process of profound inquiry, we discard each kosa individually, reflecting, I am not this physical sheath, nor the sheath of bioenergy, nor the mental sheath, nor the sheath of intellect, and not even the sheath of bliss. I cannot be any of these entities. I am fundamentally the subject, the self. The scriptures consistently describe the self in negative terms as not this, not this. The true nature of the self cannot be articulated positively. It transcends language and verbal expression. That is why we use negation to arrive at the self. We must directly experience the self. The scriptures convey the realizations of sages who have attained knowledge of the self, but their experiences are distinct from ours. The realization of the self must come from our own efforts. This process of negation can be practiced in any setting, whether you are at home by yourself, at the office, or even while waiting. Engaging in this practice can significantly transform our energies. Over time, we come to understand that we are not simply fleeting and unhappy beings. Instead, we are pure consciousness, immortal and eternally blissful.